Points between the two Manchester clubs. Alexis Sanchez, we're told this afternoon, at Carrington United's training ground, undergoing a medical, signed, they say. It's really interesting now. Sanchez, we're told, has signed for Manchester United. He is at Carrington undergoing a medical. We were right. He did not drive yesterday. He flew a private plane. But his arrival, it would appear, has unsettled Paul Pogba, whose agent is saying, we're in for a pay rise. How difficult is it, Paul, balancing the egos of these superstars?
Well, that didn't take long, did it, for someone to, to come out and make a comment about that. And that, you know, that's the responsibility of the club. And some clubs run a very stringent, you know, wage structure to ensure that there's harmony within the dressing room. And if you decide to bring in a player that's on 50, 100% more than other players in the dressing room, then you have to expect that they're going to be knocking on the door and asking for a rise. So that's the responsibility of the club, and that can only cause problems for the coach, who's always managing that dressing room on a knife edge, because anything can tip the balance of a dressing room.
Were you always walking on eggshells, you and Ancelotti at Real Madrid? Famously, for a long period of time, the club refused to admit that they'd spent more money on Bale than they had Ronaldo, in case it upset Cristiano. Were you guys aware of that?
No, only from reading it in the media. It wasn't anything we ever discussed with the players. And I've got to say that the clubs that we were at, the big clubs, they managed that side of things very well, and it was down to us to manage the football side, the training and the preparing for games.
Is he worth the sort of money Manchester United?
Well, listen, you have to balance it out. What have they paid for him? Nothing.
See, this is Norman Whiteside today.
Yeah, they've paid nothing.
On that point.
Because they've swapped Mkhitaryan for him. So they've got a player for nothing. So had he been available 6 months ago, what would they have paid for him? 40, 50 million? With a year left in his contract? Okay, so that 40, 50 million is still there.
What about Michael Owen?
No, I don't agree with Michael, saying that if I want to be a better striker, I don't think he will be a better striker. I think what you get with Sanchez is a finished article. He's 29 years of age. He's not going to get... I don't think he's going to get any better. He's at the peak of his power for me now. Physically, with his mental attitude, with his physicality. I think he's at the peak. So at 29 years of age, you don't often see a footballer get better. He'll hold the levels, I think, for a few years, but I don't see him getting any better than he is individually. So I don't think Michael's right now. I don't think it matters.
Who do you think's got the better end of this deal?
It depends what Mkhitaryan they get from me.
Yeah, I mean, Mkhitaryan has showed potential. He could go to Arsenal and surprise everyone and play as he has done, but we're talking about Alexis Sanchez, who's been Arsenal's best player for the past 4 or 5 seasons. He's going to Man United for relatively cheap.
He hasn't cost
relatively cheap.
Relatively cheap. Well, his wages...
50,000 sterling a week.
His wages are expensive. I think this is the issue now for Man United. I think he'll go there. He'll be a fantastic acquisition on the field, but will he upset people off the field? It's now already started. Paul Pogba. A lot of players these days have it in their contract that they have to be the highest paid earner at the club now. If Pogba had that in his contract, he'd probably just be sitting back smiling right now. But the fact he's come out and making noises like this suggests he hasn't, and it's an oversight on his part and his agent's part. And you know, if that's the case, usually you've got to swallow it and just get on with it, because that's the deal you sign.
Are things like this destabilising in the dressing room? Do players get jealous of what others are earning?
I think nowadays they do, yeah. I think there's so many egos within that dressing room. You know, in the dressing room, I played in there was ego, so I can only imagine stepping into the dressing room where you've got a Paul Pogba and you've got an Alexis Sanchez and you've already got a Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I can only imagine the egos. You know, Zlatan's always coming out saying he's the best and he's the man, and I'll be surprised if he's not in the paper tomorrow saying he should be the top earner. So these are the type of problems that this move could cause. But if they don't, and it works, then on the field he's a fantastic player.
Paul, let's just say, hypothetically, you're with Jose Mourinho, you're his number 2 at Manchester United, would you be concerned of the last couple of days' press that's been on about wages and about unsettling?
Not if I was the assistant. If I was the manager, I potentially would be.
Good answer. What do you know about Aubameyang, who didn't play for Dortmund Friday night, led to believe he went for a kickabout with his mates, and he wore a jersey which had Dembele's name on the back. Provocative, bearing in mind Dembele was the last man out of there for, what, 97 million? He's obviously made his mind up. What do Arsenal get if they buy him?
Oh, he's a good player. Was at Milan under Carlo, actually, as a young boy. He was in the academy. But really has cut his cloth at Dortmund, played an exciting side. He's quick, really quick. I remember him also from my time at Paris Saint-Germain. He was at St Etienne at the time. So very dangerous player. And you know, if he comes to Arsenal, they're getting a good striker.
Does he have a reputation as being a naughty boy, or is he being naughty to bring about a conclusion to this speculation?
Well, possibly. You know, I don't know the ins and outs of his character, but what I've read about Arsene Wenger in the past is he always does his due diligence with the type of personality he's bringing into the dressing room. It's something that he takes very, very seriously. So I'm sure that in this case he would have done his homework.
What's he going to do though? Say they get him. Here's another example of maybe player unrest. You've just spent a record transfer on Alexander Lacazette. What, 6 months ago, 7 months ago? A year later, 6 months later, you're breaking that record for another guy who plays in your position.
Well, we get to know each other.
But you have to put up with that. I think that's just something that they do. They get well paid, these guys, you guys.
I think
hugely well paid.
I think what's different nowadays is years ago, I think the top players were all spread out over 7 or 8 teams. So they could be the big ego in the dressing room and they could manage being one of the best 2 or 3 players in the dressing room. Nowadays, your top 3 teams have got all the best players. So there's so many egos in the one dressing room. There's so many players competing for the best. And I think that's a knock-on effect to the Premier League. The top teams are scoring an incredible amount of goals and the bottom teams are a bit more defensive and trying to shut up shop. And it's a new Premier League at the moment.